The silver moonlight cast long shadows across the ceremonial circle as Lila Hayes smoothed her hands down the flowing white dress her mother had worn on her own mating night 22 years ago. The silk felt cool against her trembling fingers, but nothing could calm the wild beating of her heart. Tonight was the night she'd dreamed of since she was a little girl playing with her dolls, the night she would finally feel the mate bond snap into place and claim her destiny as the future Luna of Silver Moon Pack. Around her, the entire pack had gathered in the ancient stone circle that had witnessed countless mating ceremonies over the centuries. Torches flickered in the gentle evening breeze, casting dancing flames that made the carved wolf heads on the ceremonial stones seem almost alive. The air thrummed with excitement and anticipation as nearly 300 pack members formed concentric circles around the sacred space, their eyes fixed on her with expectant smiles. Lila's best friend Sarah squeezed her hand from where she stood just outside the inner circle. "You look absolutely beautiful," Sarah whispered, her brown eyes sparkling with joy. "Jake won't be able to take his eyes off you." At the mention of his name, Lila's gaze automatically sought out Jake Morrison across the circle. At 23, he was everything an alpha should be, tall and powerfully built, with sandy brown hair that caught the moonlight and green eyes that had made her heart flutter since they were children. He stood with his parents, Alpha Marcus and Luna Catherine, his expression serious and regal as befitted the future leader of their pack. Lila had loved Jake Morrison for as long as she could remember. Their parents had arranged their future mating when they were just children, a political alliance that would strengthen both bloodlines and ensure the pack's continued prosperity. But somewhere along the way, what had started as childhood friendship and expectation had blossomed into something deeper for Lila. She'd watched Jake grow from a mischievous boy into a strong, confident man, and she'd fallen completely and hopelessly in love with him. "Breathe, honey," her mother whispered from beside her, placing a gentle hand on Lila's shoulder. Ellen Hayes's own mating ceremony had taken place in this very circle, and she'd told Lila countless stories about the magical moment when she'd felt the bond with Lila's father snap into place. "I know you're nervous, but this is your moment. Everything you've ever wanted is about to come true." Lila nodded, trying to calm her racing pulse. At 21, she was later than most wolves in finding her mate, but werewolves could only feel the mate bond after their 21st birthday. She'd spent the last 6 months since her birthday eagerly anticipating tonight's ceremony, the official acknowledgement of what everyone already knew, that she and Jake were destined to be together. The pack's elder, Thomas Whitehawk, stepped into the center of the circle, his weathered hands raised for silence. His voice carried easily across the gathered crowd, strong despite his advanced age. "Brothers and sisters of Silver Moon Pack, we gather tonight under the blessed full moon to witness the joining of two souls destined by the moon goddess herself." A murmur of excitement rippled through the crowd. Lila felt her wolf stirring inside her, a sensation she'd only recently begun to experience. Unlike most werewolves who could shift by their 18th birthday, Lila was what the pack politely called a late bloomer. Her wolf had only just begun to make itself known, and she still couldn't shift. It was a source of private shame for her, though Jake had always assured her it didn't matter. "Jake Morrison, future alpha of Silver Moon Pack, step forward," Elder Whitehawk commanded. Lila's breath caught in her throat as Jake moved into the circle with the fluid grace of a born predator. He was dressed in traditional ceremonial clothes, black leather pants and a white linen shirt that emphasized his broad shoulders and muscled chest. His sandy hair was slightly tousled by the evening breeze, and when he turned to look at her, Lila felt her knees go weak. This was it. This was the moment she'd been waiting for her entire life. "Lila Hayes, daughter of Silver Moon Pack, step forward," the elder called. On trembling legs, Lila walked into the center of the circle. The white silk of her dress whispered around her ankles with each step, and she could feel the weight of 300 pairs of eyes watching her every move. When she reached Jake, she looked up into his familiar green eyes, expecting to see the warmth and affection that had always been there. Instead, she saw something that made her heart skip a beat in the worst possible way. His expression was cold, almost distant, and there was something in his eyes she'd never seen before, something that looked almost like disgust. "Jake?" she whispered, too quietly for anyone else to hear. He didn't respond, didn't even seem to hear her. Instead, he stood rigidly straight, his jaw clenched tight as he stared over her head at the crowd beyond. Elder Whitehawk began the traditional ceremony, his voice rising and falling in the ancient cadence that had been used for generations. Under the light of the full moon, we call upon the moon goddess to bless this union. Jake Morrison, do you accept Lila Hayes as your mate, to love and protect, to honor and cherish, for all the days of your life? This was it. This was the moment Jake would speak the ritual words that would bind them together forever. Lila's heart hammered against her ribs as she waited for his response, her entire body trembling with anticipation and joy. Jake was quiet for so long that murmurs began to ripple through the crowd. Lila looked up at him, confusion and the first stirrings of fear beginning to churn in her stomach. Why wasn't he speaking? Why did he look so cold, so angry? Finally, Jake opened his mouth, and when he spoke, his voice carried clearly across the ceremonial circle, reaching every single member of the pack. I, Jake Morrison, future alpha of Silver Moon Pack, reject you, Lila Hayes, as my mate. The words hit Lila like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs and making her stumble backward. The crowd erupted in gasps and shocked whispers, but all Lila could hear was the roaring in her ears as Jake's rejection echoed through her mind. What? She whispered, her voice barely audible even to herself. But Jake wasn't finished. His green eyes, once so warm when they looked at her, were now cold as winter ice. You are weak, wolfless, and not worthy of an alpha's bloodline. I will not tie myself to someone who cannot even shift, who brings nothing but shame to this pack. Each word was like a dagger to her heart. Lila felt her legs give out beneath her, and she would have fallen if not for Elder Whitehawk's steady hand on her arm. The entire pack was in chaos now, some gasping in shock, others whispering furiously to their neighbors, and a few laughing with cruel satisfaction. Jake, what are you doing? Alpha Marcus demanded, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. This was arranged years ago. You gave your word. I've changed my mind, Jake said coldly, not even looking at his father. As future alpha, I have the right to choose my mate. And I choose someone who can actually contribute to this pack's strength. Lila's vision blurred with tears as the full horror of the situation crashed over her. She was being rejected. Publicly. She was being rejected. Publicly. In front of the entire pack. The humiliation was so complete, so devastating, that she felt like she might die from the shame of it. From somewhere in the crowd, she heard Melissa Carter's voice, sweet as honey and twice as poisonous. Poor Lila. I guess some of us are just meant to be alone. Melissa was everything Lila wasn't, a powerful warrior, beautiful and confident, with her wolf fully developed and her fighting skills unmatched among the younger females. She was also, Lila realized with dawning horror, standing very close to Jake's family, a smug smile playing at her lips. Jake, Lila whispered, her voice broken and pleading. Please, I don't understand. What did I do wrong? I thought you loved me. For just a moment, something flickered in Jake's eyes, regret, maybe, or pain. But it was gone so quickly Lila thought she might have imagined it. Love? Jake laughed, the sound harsh and cruel. I was doing my duty, nothing more. Did you really think I could love someone like you? Someone so pathetic that she can't even shift on command? The crowd's whispers grew louder, and Lila could hear fragments of their conversations, words like disgrace and embarrassing and should have seen this coming. Some faces showed pity, others showed cruel satisfaction, and a few showed outright disgust. These were people she'd known her entire life, people she'd considered family, and now they were looking at her like she was something dirty and shameful. I need to go, Lila choked out, turning toward the edge of the circle. Yes, Jake said coldly. You should go. There's nothing for you here. Lila took a stumbling step toward the crowd, her vision blurred with tears and her chest tight with pain that felt like it might kill her. The faces of the pack members swam before her, some pitying, some disgusted, some openly entertained by her humiliation. She needed to get away, needed to run somewhere she could fall apart in private. But just as she reached the edge of the ceremonial circle, a voice cut through the chaos like a blade through silk. Deep, commanding, and utterly unfamiliar, it silenced the crowd instantly. Interesting. I'll take her. Every head in the ceremonial circle turned toward the tree line, where a figure emerged from the shadows like something out of a dream, or a nightmare. He was tall, even taller than Jake, with broad shoulders and a lean, powerful build that spoke of deadly strength. His hair was black as midnight, and when he stepped into the torchlight, Lila could see that his eyes were the most unusual shade of silver she'd ever seen, like moonlight on water. But it wasn't his appearance that made the entire pack take a collective step backward. It was the aura of raw, undiluted power that radiated from him like heat from a forge. This wasn't just any werewolf, this was an alpha, and one far more powerful than anyone Lila had ever encountered. Damon Blackthorne, Alpha Marcus breathed, his face going pale. What are you doing on Silver Moon territory? Damon Blackthorne. Even Lila, sheltered as she'd been, knew that name. He was the alpha of Shadow Ridge Pack, Silver Moon's most bitter enemy. The two packs had been feuding for over 50 years, ever since a territorial dispute had turned bloody and left dozens dead on both sides. Shadow Ridge wolves were forbidden from entering Silver Moon territory, just as Silver Moon wolves were forbidden from crossing into Shadow Ridge lands. Trespassing, apparently, Damon said, his voice carrying a hint of dark amusement. His silver eyes swept over the assembled pack with obvious disdain before settling on Jake. Though I must say, Morrison, I'm disappointed. I expected better from Marcus's son. Jake's face flushed red with anger, and Lila could see his hands beginning to shake with the effort of controlling his wolf. You have no business here, Blackthorne. Leave. Now. Oh, I don't think so, Damon said, taking another step into the circle. Several pack warriors moved to intercept him, but he ignored them completely, his attention focused entirely on Lila. Not when there's such an interesting situation developing here. Lila found herself frozen under his intense gaze, unable to look away from those strange silver eyes. There was something in his expression she couldn't identify, recognition, maybe, or satisfaction, as if he'd been waiting for exactly this moment. You can't have her, Jake snarled, his wolf beginning to push through. She belongs to Silver Moon Pack. Does she? Damon asked, his tone conversational despite the tension crackling through the air. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you just rejected her rather publicly. That makes her available, doesn't it? He began walking toward Lila with the fluid, predatory grace of a natural hunter. The pack warriors stepped aside, whether from fear or confusion, Lila couldn't tell. All she knew was that this dangerous, beautiful stranger was approaching her with an intensity that made her skin tingle and her wolf whimper with something that wasn't entirely fear. Stay away from her, Jake warned, but his voice lacked the authority it should have carried. He was a future alpha, but Damon Blackthorne was a current one, and the difference in power was obvious to everyone present. Damon stopped directly in front of Lila, close enough that she could smell his scent, pine and cedar and something wild and masculine that made her head spin. He was even more imposing up close, radiating the kind of dangerous charisma that made smart people do stupid things. Hello, Lila, he said softly, and the sound of her name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. You deserve so much better than this. I don't understand, Lila whispered, her voice barely audible. Why are you here? How do you know my name? Something flickered in those silver eyes, an emotion too complex for her to identify. Let's just say I've been keeping an eye on Silver Moon Pack's affairs. And I have to say, I'm appalled by what I've witnessed tonight. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. When she didn't move, he gently touched her cheek, his fingers warm against her skin. No one should be treated the way you've been treated. Especially not someone as special as you. Special? Lila laughed bitterly, tears still streaming down her face. I can't even shift. I'm everything Jake said I am, weak, worthless. Stop. The command in Damon's voice was absolute, cutting off her self-deprecating words instantly. You are none of those things. And I'll prove it to you. Before Lila could ask what he meant, Damon's hands framed her face, tilting her head up to meet his eyes. Jake Morrison is a fool who doesn't recognize treasure when it's right in front of him. But I do. What are you? Lila began, but her words were cut off as Damon lowered his head and captured her lips in a kiss that stole her breath and set her entire world on fire. It wasn't gentle or tentative like she'd always imagined her first kiss would be. It was passionate and demanding, claiming and possessive in a way that made her knees go weak and her wolf howl with something that felt like recognition. She'd never been kissed before, had been saving her first kiss for her mating ceremony with Jake, but now she couldn't imagine why she'd ever thought Jake's kiss could compare to this. When Damon finally pulled away, Lila was breathless and dizzy, her entire body tingling with sensations she'd never experienced before. But before she could fully process what had just happened, Damon's arms tightened around her, and she felt him lower his head to her neck. "No!" Jake roared, finally breaking free of his shock. "Don't you dare!" But it was too late. Damon's teeth sank into the tender skin where her neck met her shoulder, marking her in the most primal and permanent way possible. The pain was sharp and immediate, but it was quickly overwhelmed by a sensation unlike anything Lila had ever experienced. Power flooded through her veins like liquid fire, and she could suddenly feel Damon's emotions as clearly as her own, his fierce protectiveness, his satisfaction, and underneath it all, something that felt impossibly like longing. The mate bond snapped into place with a force that nearly knocked her off her feet, connecting her to this dangerous stranger in ways she never could have imagined. "Mine," Damon growled against her neck, his voice rough with possession and something deeper. "You're mine now, Lila. And I protect what's mine." The ceremonial circle erupted into chaos. Jake shifted into his wolf with a snarl of pure rage, his sandy brown coat bristling as he prepared to attack. Several other pack warriors followed suit, their wolves emerging as they moved to defend their territory from the intruder who had just claimed one of their own. But Damon didn't seem concerned by the threat. He straightened slowly, keeping Lila pressed against his chest, and when he looked at the advancing wolves, his eyes had gone completely silver, the sign of an alpha at the height of his power. "I wouldn't," he said conversationally, but there was steel beneath the casual tone. "You're outnumbered." As if summoned by his words, more figures emerged from the tree line, a dozen Shadow Ridge warriors in their wolf forms, their eyes glowing in the torchlight as they surrounded the ceremonial circle. They were larger than the Silver Moon wolves, more battle-scarred, and the aura of menace they projected made several of the pack members back away in fear. "This is an act of war," Alpha Marcus declared, his own wolf beginning to push through. "You cannot steal one of our pack members." "Steal?" Damon laughed, the sound dark and dangerous. "I didn't steal anything. Jake rejected her, remember? In front of the entire pack. That makes her free to choose her own path." His arms tightened protectively around Lila. "And she's chosen me." "I haven't chosen anything," Lila protested weakly, though even as she said the words, she could feel the truth of the mate bond humming between them. Damon was her mate, not Jake, never Jake. The realization was staggering and terrifying and somehow inevitable all at once. "Your wolf knows," Damon murmured in her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "Can't you feel it? The bond between us? You were never meant for him, Lila. You were always meant for me." She could feel it, the invisible thread connecting her heart to his, the way her wolf was practically purring at his nearness. It should have been impossible. Mates were destined by the moon goddess, and she'd been so sure that Jake was hers. But the evidence was undeniable. Whatever she'd felt for Jake had been pale imitation compared to the intensity of what she felt for Damon. "This isn't over, Blackthorne," Jake snarled, having shifted back to human form. His green eyes blazed with hatred and something that looked like genuine pain. "She's been promised to me since childhood. You can't just take her." "I already have," Damon said simply. He looked down at Lila, his silver eyes searching her face. "The question is, will you come with me willingly, or do I need to carry you?" Lila looked around the ceremonial circle at the faces of the pack she'd called family her entire life. Some looked at her with pity, others with disgust, and a few with outright hostility. These people had watched Jake humiliate her in the cruelest possible way, and not a single one had stepped forward to defend her. Her own parents stood frozen at the edge of the circle, her mother's face streaked with tears and her father's expression unreadable. "Lila, honey, you don't have to do this," her mother called out desperately. "Come home with us. We'll figure this out." "Figure what out?" Lila asked, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "How to undo the fact that your future son-in-law just called me worthless in front of the entire pack. How to make people forget that Jake rejected me so completely that an enemy alpha felt sorry enough for me to claim me out of pity." "It's not pity," Damon said quietly, his voice meant for her ears alone. "I promise you, what I feel for you has nothing to do with pity." Lila looked up into his silver eyes and saw the truth there. Whatever his motivations, pity wasn't one of them. There was heat in his gaze, and possession, and something that made her pulse race and her skin flush. "If I go with you," she said slowly, "what happens to me?" "You become Luna of Shadow Ridge Pack," Damon said without hesitation. "You become my mate, my equal, my partner in all things. And anyone who dares to call you weak or worthless will answer to me." The promise in his voice was absolute, and Lila felt something inside her chest, some wounded, broken part of her heart, begin to heal at his words. When was the last time someone had spoken of her with such fierce protectiveness? When had anyone ever made her feel like she was worth fighting for? "Lila, please," Jake said, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he sounded like the boy she'd once loved. "Don't do this. Don't go with him. He's the enemy." "No," Lila said, cutting him off. "You're the enemy, Jake. You're the one who destroyed everything we had. You're the one who humiliated me in front of everyone I care about." She straightened her shoulders, finding strength she didn't know she possessed. "At least he's honest about what he wants." Damon's smile was slow and satisfied, like a predator who'd just won a particularly challenging hunt. "Are you saying yes, little wolf? Little wolf?" The endearment sent warmth spreading through her chest, and Lila realized that for the first time in her life, someone was calling her Wolf Little as a term of affection rather than derision. "I'm saying yes," she said, loud enough for the entire pack to hear. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Jake let out a roar of rage and shifted back into his wolf, lunging toward them with his teeth bared. But he never reached them. Damon moved with inhuman speed, shifting partially and catching Jake in midair with claws that gleamed silver in the torchlight. "Touch her," Damon snarled, his voice distorted by the partial shift, "and I'll rip your throat out." The two alphas faced each other for a tense moment, power crackling between them like electricity. Finally, Jake backed down, shifting back to human form with his head bowed in submission. "Smart boy," Damon said, shifting back to fully human form. He turned to Lila and swept her up in his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing. "Hold on, little wolf. We're going home." As they left the ceremonial circle behind, Lila caught one last glimpse of her former life, her parents' tear-stained faces, Sarah's expression of shock and betrayal, and Jake standing alone in the center of the circle, his hands clenched into fists and his face twisted with rage and something that might have been regret. Then the trees closed around them, and Silver Moon Pack disappeared into the darkness. Lila was leaving behind everything she'd ever known, everything she'd ever wanted, to follow a man who was supposed to be her enemy into an uncertain future. But as Damon's arms tightened around her and she felt the steady beat of his heart against her cheek, Lila realized she wasn't afraid. For the first time in her life, she felt truly safe, truly wanted, truly valued. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth the risk. As they ran through the forest towards Shadow Ridge territory, Lila could hear the howls of Silver Moon Pack behind them, some angry, some mournful, some calling her back. But she didn't look over her shoulder. She kept her eyes fixed ahead, on the unknown future that awaited her with the dangerous, beautiful man who had just turned her entire world upside down. The mate bond hummed between them, stronger with each passing moment, and Lila's wolf settled contentedly in her chest for the first time in her life. Whatever came next, whatever challenges awaited them, she would face them with Damon at her side. She was no longer Lila Hayes, the wolfless disappointment of Silver Moon Pack. She was Lila Blackthorne now, Luna to be of Shadow Ridge Pack. And that felt like the beginning of everything. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to support this channel. Chapter 2. Lila woke slowly, consciousness filtering back to her in stages. The first thing she noticed was that she wasn't in her own bed. The mattress beneath her was too soft, the sheets too luxurious, and the pillows smelled like cedar and pine instead of the lavender sachets her mother tucked into her pillowcases. The second thing she noticed was the dull throb in her neck where Damon had marked her, a constant reminder that the events of the previous night hadn't been some terrible nightmare. She sat up carefully, wincing as the movement pulled at her tender neck, and took her first real look at her surroundings. The bedroom was beautiful in a way that spoke of wealth and refined taste, hardwood floors covered with thick Persian rugs, furniture that looked handcrafted rather than store-bought, and tall windows that let in streams of golden morning sunlight. Everything was decorated in rich earth tones that somehow managed to be both masculine and inviting. It was nothing like the small, cozy cottage she'd shared with her parents at Silver Moon Pack territory. This room was easily 3 times the size of her entire bedroom back home, and the adjoining bathroom she could glimpse through an open doorway looked like something out of a luxury hotel. Home. The word felt strange now. Was Silver Moon Pack still her home, or was this place, wherever this was, supposed to be home now? Before she could spiral too deeply into that particular crisis, a soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, her voice still rough from sleep and the emotional upheaval of the night before. The door opened to reveal a woman who looked to be in her mid-20s, with the same midnight black hair as Damon but warm brown eyes instead of his piercing silver. She was beautiful in an understated way, with delicate features and a gentle smile that immediately put Lila at ease. "Good morning," the woman said, carrying a tray that smelled deliciously of coffee and fresh pastries. "I hope you slept well. I'm Luna Sarah Blackthorne, but please, just call me Sarah." "Luna?" Lila repeated, confused. "But I thought, isn't Damon the alpha?" Sarah's smile widened as she set the tray on the small table by the window. "He is. I'm his sister. In Shadow Ridge Pack, the alpha's sister holds the title of Luna until he takes a mate." She paused, her eyes twinkling with something that might have been amusement. "Though I suppose that situation is about to change, isn't it?" Heat flooded Lila's cheeks as the full implications of her new situation hit her. She was Damon's mate now, or would be, once they completed the mating ceremony. That made her the future Luna of Shadow Ridge Pack, a position she had never wanted and certainly didn't feel qualified for. "I don't know," Lila said honestly. "I'm not even sure what I'm doing here. Last night it all happened so fast." Sarah's expression grew sympathetic as she poured coffee into 2 delicate china cups. "Damon told me what happened at your mating ceremony." "I'm so sorry, Lila. Jake Morrison is a fool, and you deserved so much better than that." The kindness in Sarah's voice made Lila's eyes well up with tears she thought she'd cried out the night before. She'd expected to be treated as an enemy here, or at best as an unwelcome intruder. She hadn't expected genuine compassion from Damon's sister. "I still can't believe it happened," Lila admitted, accepting the cup of coffee gratefully. "I thought Jake loved me. We were supposed to be mated, supposed to build a life together. I planned my whole future around him." "Sometimes the future we plan isn't the future we're meant to have," Sarah said gently, settling into the chair across from her. "The moon goddess has a way of redirecting our paths when we're heading in the wrong direction." Lila took a sip of her coffee. It was perfectly brewed, rich and smooth, and tried to process everything that had happened. "Your brother said I was always meant for him. How is that possible? I've never even met him before last night." Something flickered in Sarah's eyes, gone too quickly for Lila to interpret. "Damon has his reasons for everything he does. He'll explain when he's ready." She leaned forward, her expression growing more serious. "But I want you to know that you're safe here, Lila. Whatever brought you to us, you're part of Shadow Ridge Pack now, and we protect our own." The certainty in Sarah's voice was comforting, but it also raised new questions. "What does that mean, exactly? Being part of the pack?" I don't know anything about your customs or your people. At Silver Moon, Shadow Ridge was always described as. She hesitated, not wanting to offend her hostess. As savage enemies who would tear you apart without a second thought. Sarah supplied with a wry smile. Yes, I imagine that's how Marcus Morrison would describe us. The truth is somewhat less dramatic. She stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the view beyond. Shadow Ridge Pack values strength, but we also value loyalty, honor, and family. We're more direct than Silver Moon Pack, perhaps. Less concerned with politics and more focused on protecting what matters to us. Lila joined her at the window and gasped at what she saw. The view from the bedroom looked out over a vast valley filled with dense forest and rolling hills, all of it bathed in the golden light of morning. In the distance, she could see the shadows of mountains rising against the horizon, and scattered throughout the valley were well-built homes and buildings that spoke of a thriving, prosperous community. It's beautiful, she breathed. Damon's father built the pack house on this hill specifically for this view, Sarah said proudly. He wanted every alpha after him to wake up each morning and see what they were responsible for protecting. What happened to him? Lila asked. Damon's father? Sarah's expression grew sad. He died when Damon was 25. A hunting accident, officially, though. She shook her head. That's not my story to tell. Damon can share it with you if he chooses to. Before Lila could ask what she meant by that, another knock sounded at the door. This time, it opened to reveal Damon himself, looking devastatingly handsome in dark jeans and a forest green sweater that brought out the silver in his eyes. Good morning, little wolf, he said, his deep voice sending a shiver of awareness down Lila's spine. I hope Sarah has been taking good care of you. She's been wonderful, Lila said, though she felt suddenly shy in his presence. In the bright light of day, the events of the previous night seemed almost surreal. Had she really agreed to leave her entire life behind to follow this man she barely knew? Damon's eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her skin flush. How are you feeling? Any regrets about last night? The question was asked casually, but Lila could sense the tension beneath it. He was giving her an out, she realized. If she wanted to go back to Silver Moon Pack, he would let her. But the thought of returning to face Jake's rejection and the pack's pity made her stomach turn. More than that, the mate bond that had formed between them was like a warm, constant presence in her chest, and the idea of breaking it felt wrong on a fundamental level. No regrets, she said firmly. But I do have questions. Damon's smile was slow and satisfied. I would be disappointed if you didn't. Why don't you get dressed, and I'll show you around the territory. We can talk while we walk. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Sarah had some clothes sent up that should fit you. Your belongings from Silver Moon will be retrieved later today. After he left, Sarah helped Lila select an outfit from the wardrobe that had indeed been stocked with clothes in her exact size, dark jeans, a soft blue sweater, and sturdy hiking boots. Everything was high quality and fit perfectly, which raised the question of how Damon had known her measurements. Ready? Sarah asked as Lila finished braiding her hair. As ready as I can be, Lila replied, though her stomach was full of butterflies. Damon was waiting for them in what appeared to be a spacious living room decorated in the same warm, masculine style as the bedroom. When he saw Lila, his eyes darkened with an emotion she couldn't quite identify. Perfect, he murmured, and the approval in his voice made heat pool in her belly. Sarah laughed and swatted her brother's arm. Behave yourself. She's had enough shocks for one day. She turned to Lila with a warm smile. I'll leave you two to get acquainted. Lila, if you need anything at all, just ask anyone in the pack house. They'll help you. After Sarah left, an awkward silence fell between them. Finally, Damon gestured toward the door. Shall we? The pack house was even more impressive than Lila had realized from her bedroom window. It was built like a rustic lodge, with soaring ceilings, exposed wooden beams, and enormous windows that filled the space with natural light. But despite its size, it felt warm and welcoming rather than intimidating. This is beautiful, Lila said as they walked through a great room dominated by a massive stone fireplace. My father designed it to be a home, not just a seat of power, Damon replied. He believed that an alpha's strength came from his connection to his pack, not from intimidating them. They stepped outside onto a wraparound porch that offered even more spectacular views of the valley. The morning air was crisp and clean, scented with pine and wildflowers, and Lila could hear the distant sound of children playing somewhere in the pack village below. It's so different from what I expected, she admitted as they started down a well-maintained path that led toward the village. What did you expect? Lila hesitated, not wanting to offend him. At Silver Moon, we were told that Shadow Ridge was a place of violence and chaos. That your pack was made up of rogues and outcasts who followed strength over honor. Damon's laugh was rich and deep. And what do you think now? I think maybe Silver Moon Pack has been telling stories to make themselves feel better about a feud they can't win, Lila said honestly. The approval in Damon's eyes made her pulse quicken. Very perceptive, little wolf. The truth is, our packs have been enemies for so long that most people have forgotten what we're actually fighting about. As they walked through the village, Lila was struck by how normal everything seemed. Pack members were going about their daily business, children playing in yards, adults working in gardens, elderly wolves sitting on porches and watching the world go by. When they saw Damon, they greeted him with respect but also genuine warmth, and many of them looked at Lila with curiosity rather than hostility. Alpha Damon called a woman hanging laundry on a line outside a charming cottage. Is this our new Luna? It is, Damon replied, his hand finding the small of Lila's back in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. Everyone, I'd like you to meet Lila. The woman beamed and hurried over, wiping her hands on her apron. Welcome to Shadow Ridge, Luna. I'm Margaret. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. Similar scenes played out as they continued through the village. Pack members introduced themselves with genuine warmth, children shyly offered Lila wildflowers they'd picked, and the elderly wolves shared stories about Damon's father and what a good alpha he'd been. They're not what I expected either, Lila murmured as they reached the edge of the village and started up a trail that led into the forest. What did you expect? Fear, I suppose. Submission born of terror rather than respect. She glanced up at him. They love you. Something vulnerable flickered in Damon's silver eyes. I've tried to be the kind of alpha my father would have been proud of. Leadership through strength, yes, but also through protection and care for the pack's well-being. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, following a trail that wound through dense forest filled with towering pines and ancient oaks. The mate bond between them hummed softly, creating an awareness of each other that was both thrilling and slightly overwhelming. Finally, Damon led her to a clearing where a small waterfall tumbled down moss-covered rocks into a crystal-clear pool. The sound of the falling water was peaceful, and the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees created an almost magical atmosphere. This is where I come when I need to think, Damon said, settling on a fallen log near the water's edge. It's where my father brought me when he wanted to have serious conversations. Lila sat beside him, careful to maintain some distance despite the mate bond's urging to move closer. Speaking of serious conversations, I think it's time you answered some of my questions. Ask me anything. Why were you at Silver Moon territory last night? Your packs have been enemies for decades. You couldn't have just happened to be in the area. Damon was quiet for so long that Lila began to think he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. I've been keeping an eye on Silver Moon Pack's activities for several months. There have been concerning developments. What kind of developments? Strange alliances. Meetings with people who have no business being in werewolf territory. And rumors about Jake Morrison that made me question his fitness to be an alpha. Damon's jaw tightened. Last night confirmed my worst fears about his character. Lila felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? A true alpha protects the vulnerable members of his pack. He doesn't humiliate them for his own amusement. Damon turned to face her fully. What Jake did to you last night wasn't just cruel, it was a violation of everything leadership should represent. The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Lila's heart skip a beat. But that still doesn't explain why you claimed me. You could have just left me to deal with the consequences of his rejection. Damon's hand moved to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing gently across her skin. Do you really not know, little wolf? The endearment sent warmth spiraling through her chest. Know what? You're my mate, Lila. You were always meant to be mine. His silver eyes searched her face intently. Didn't you feel it the moment I touched you? The rightness of it? The way your wolf recognized mine? She had felt it, the instant, overwhelming sense of connection that had nothing to do with gratitude or rebellion and everything to do with destiny. But it still seemed impossible. I don't understand how that's possible, she whispered. I thought Jake was my mate. Everyone said we were destined for each other. What everyone said and what the moon goddess intended are two very different things. Damon's thumb continued its gentle caress across her cheek. Arranged matings are political alliances, nothing more. True mate bonds are gifts from the goddess herself, and they can't be forced or faked. But why didn't I feel the bond with you before last night? If we're truly mates, shouldn't I have known? Something shuddered in Damon's expression. That's complicated. Complicated how? Damon dropped his hand and looked out over the water, his jaw tight with tension. There are things about your past, about your family, that you don't know. Things that your parents chose to keep from you to protect you. A cold knot of dread formed in Lila's stomach. What kind of things? The kind that are better discussed when you're more settled. When you've had time to adjust to your new life here. He stood abruptly, effectively ending the conversation. Come on. There's more I want to show you. Frustration flared in Lila's chest. You can't just drop hints like that and then refuse to explain. If there are things about my family that I don't know, I have a right to hear them. Damon turned back to her, and the expression on his face was both tender and implacable. You do have that right. But not today. Today, you're still recovering from having your entire world turned upside down. Let yourself have time to breathe before we add more complications to the mix. Part of Lila wanted to press the issue, but she could see that Damon wasn't going to budge. And if she was being honest with herself, she wasn't sure she was ready to hear whatever secrets he was holding back. The events of the last 24 hours had already overwhelmed her emotional capacity. Fine, she said, standing and brushing dirt off her jeans. But I want answers soon, Damon. All of them. His smile was both relieved and approving. I wouldn't expect anything less from my mate. They spent the rest of the morning exploring the territory. Damon showed her the pack school, where children learned both traditional academics and werewolf skills like tracking and hunting. He introduced her to the pack's healer, an elderly woman named Elena who welcomed Lila with knowing eyes and promised to teach her about medicinal herbs if she was interested. At the training grounds, Lila watched in fascination as pack warriors practiced combat techniques. They moved with a fluid grace that spoke of years of training, and their obvious skill and discipline impressed her. Would you like to try? Damon asked, noticing her interest. Try what? Training. Learning to defend yourself. His expression grew serious. As my mate, you'll need to be able to protect yourself. There are those who would see you as a target simply because of who you are now. The thought was sobering, but also oddly exciting. At Silver Moon, she'd never been allowed to train with the warriors because of her late development and Jake's insistence that his future mate didn't need to know how to fight. I'd like that, she said. Damon's smile was proud and pleased. We'll start tomorrow. Elena will also work with you on accessing your wolf. Just because you're a late bloomer doesn't mean you're weak, it often means the opposite. As they walked back toward the pack house for lunch, Lila found herself relaxing for the first time since Jake's rejection. The territory was beautiful, the pack members were welcoming, and Damon. Damon was nothing like what she'd expected from an enemy alpha. He was protective without being controlling, strong without being cruel, and the way he looked at her made her feel beautiful and valued in a way she'd never experienced before. The mate bond between them was growing stronger by the hour, and she was beginning to understand why the moon goddess had chosen them for each other. But just as she was starting to feel like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to work out, a commotion erupted from the direction of the pack house. Shouts and the sound of running feet reached them through the trees, and Damon immediately tensed beside her. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his alpha authority slipping into his voice as he moved to shield her with his body. They crested the hill to find the pack house surrounded by Silver Moon warriors, their wolves pacing restlessly as they faced off against Shadow Ridge defenders. In the center of the standoff stood Jake Morrison, his face twisted with rage and determination. "I know she's here, Blackthorne," Jake called out when he spotted them. "Return what belongs to me, and there won't be any bloodshed." Damon's growl was low and dangerous. "She doesn't belong to you, Morrison. You made that abundantly clear last night." "I made a mistake," Jake snarled. "One I'm here to correct." The possessive fury in his voice sent a chill down Lila's spine. This wasn't the Jake she'd grown up with, this was something darker, more dangerous, and utterly obsessed. "There's nothing to correct," Lila called out, stepping around Damon despite his protective stance. "I made my choice, Jake. I'm where I belong now." Jake's green eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her want to step back. "You don't know what you're saying, Lila. He's poisoned your mind against me. Come home with me, and we'll work this out." "My mind is perfectly clear," Lila replied, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "And this is my home now." The words rang with truth, and she realized as she spoke them that they were completely accurate. In less than 24 hours, Shadow Ridge had shown her more acceptance and care than Silver Moon ever had. Jake's face darkened with rage. "You're making a mistake, Lila. A mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life." Something in his tone sent ice through her veins, not just anger, but a promise that sounded almost like a threat. Damon stepped forward, his own wolf clearly fighting for dominance. "Leave. Now. Before I forget that we're not technically at war yet." For a tense moment, the two groups faced each other, violence hanging in the air like a brewing storm. Then Jake signaled to his warriors, and they began to withdraw. But as they reached the tree line, Jake turned back one last time. "This isn't over, Lila. You'll see that I'm right about him. And when you do, I'll be waiting." As the Silver Moon warriors disappeared into the forest, Lila found herself shaking with a combination of adrenaline and fear. Jake's parting words had sounded less like a promise and more like a threat, and something told her that their problems with Silver Moon Pack were just beginning. Damon's arms came around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "It's all right, little wolf. You're safe. I won't let anyone hurt you." Lila leaned into his strength, letting his warmth chase away the chill Jake's words had left behind. But even as she allowed herself to be comforted, she couldn't shake the feeling that Jake Morrison wasn't going to give up easily. And something about the way he'd looked at her, possessive and desperate and slightly unhinged, told her that he was capable of far more than she'd ever imagined. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to support this channel. Chapter 3. 3 days had passed since Jake's unexpected visit, and Lila was beginning to settle into a routine at Shadow Ridge Pack. Her mornings were spent with Elena, the pack healer, learning about medicinal herbs and working on meditation techniques designed to help her connect with her wolf. Her afternoons were devoted to training with Damon, who proved to be a patient but demanding teacher as he worked to build her strength and fighting skills. But it was the evenings that Lila looked forward to most, quiet dinners with Damon and Sarah, followed by long walks through the territory where she and Damon talked about everything and nothing while their mate bond grew stronger with each passing hour. This particular morning found her in the pack house library, a vast room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with everything from ancient werewolf lore to modern literature. She'd been drawn to the history section, curious to learn more about the Shadow Ridge Pack and the ongoing feud with Silver Moon. Most of the books contained the same basic information she'd already heard: territorial disputes, philosophical differences about pack leadership, the occasional skirmish that had escalated into something more serious. But it was a leather-bound journal tucked between two larger volumes that caught her attention. The journal's pages were yellowed with age, and the handwriting inside was elegant but faded. As Lila began to read, she realized it was a personal account written by someone named Marcus Hayes, a name that made her heart skip a beat. Hayes. Her father's surname. With trembling fingers, she turned the pages, searching for more clues about the identity of the journal's author. What she found made her blood run cold. The debt I owe to Alpha Blackthorne weighs heavily on my conscience, one entry read. Without his intervention, Silver Moon Pack would have fallen to the rogue attack, and my daughter would have grown up an orphan. But the price he asks in return. Lila's hands shook as she continued reading, the truth becoming clearer with each damning line. Damon has asked for Lila's hand when she comes of age. The political implications are staggering. A union between our packs could end the feud permanently. But I cannot bear the thought of my daughter being used as a bargaining chip, no matter how honorable Damon's intentions. I have decided to arrange her betrothal to Jake Morrison instead. Marcus Morrison is eager for the alliance, and Jake seems genuinely fond of Lila. Perhaps if she believes their union is destiny rather than politics, she will be happy. Damon will be angry, but he is an honorable man. He will not force a mating that the girl does not want. I pray I am making the right choice. I pray that my daughter will forgive me when she learns the truth. The journal slipped from Lila's nerveless fingers, landing on the library floor with a soft thud. Her father had made a deal with Damon's father. She had been promised to Shadow Ridge Pack years ago, and her betrothal to Jake had been her father's attempt to break that agreement. Find something interesting? Lila spun around to find Damon standing in the library doorway, his silver eyes taking in her pale face and the fallen journal with knowing resignation. You knew, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You knew about this all along. Damon stepped into the library and closed the door behind him, his movements careful and controlled. Yes. I knew. When Jake rejected me, you didn't just happen to be there. You were waiting for it to happen. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture that made her feel sick. Did you pay him to reject me? Did you orchestrate the whole thing? No. Damon's voice was sharp with denial. Jake's rejection was his own choice, motivated by his own cruelty and stupidity. I had nothing to do with that. But you were there because you knew it might happen. Damon moved closer, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. I was there because I've been watching Silver Moon Pack for months, and I was growing concerned about Jake's behavior. The way he treated you, the way he talked about you when he thought no one was listening. I knew something was going to happen eventually. Lila backed away from him until her spine hit the bookshelf behind her. So you decided to swoop in and collect what you thought was owed to you. Pain flashed across Damon's features. Is that really what you think? That I see you as property to be collected? I don't know what to think. Lila's voice cracked with emotion. My entire life has been built on lies. My parents let me believe that Jake and I were destined mates while knowing that I'd been promised to someone else. You let me believe that our bond was some kind of magical destiny when you knew the truth all along. Our bond is destiny, Damon said fiercely. The arrangement between our fathers has nothing to do with what I feel for you, Lila. Nothing to do with what we have together. How can I believe that? How can I trust anything you say when you've been lying to me from the moment we met? Damon's jaw tightened with frustration. I haven't been lying. I've been protecting you from truths you weren't ready to hear. That's not your choice to make. Lila pushed past him, heading for the door. I'm not a child, Damon. I have a right to know about my own life. Where are you going? Somewhere I can think without you hovering over me, making decisions about what I can and can't handle. Lila fled the library and the pack house, needing space and air and time to process the magnitude of what she discovered. She found herself at the waterfall where Damon had brought her on her first day, the peaceful sound of falling water doing nothing to calm the storm raging in her chest. She sat on the fallen log where they'd shared their first real conversation, and the memory of how safe and cherished she'd felt in that moment made her eyes burn with unshed tears. Had any of it been real? Or had Damon simply been playing a part, fulfilling an obligation to an old agreement? I thought I might find you here. Lila looked up to see Sarah approaching with 2 cups of steaming tea and a sympathetic expression. "Let me guess," Lila said bitterly. "You knew too. About the arrangement between your fathers?" "Yes." Sarah settled beside her on the log and offered her one of the cups. "But I also know my brother, Lila. And what he feels for you has nothing to do with duty or obligation." "How can you be sure?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, staring out over the water. "Did Damon tell you how our father died?" "He said it was a hunting accident." "That's the official story. The truth is more complicated." Sarah's voice grew soft with old pain. "There was a curse placed on our family line generations ago. Every alpha in the Blackthorne bloodline dies before his 30th birthday, usually in some violent, unexpected way." Lila's blood chilled. "A curse?" "Our father was 29 when he died. His father before him made it to 28. Damon is 29 now, and he's been living under the shadow of that curse his entire life." The implications hit Lila like a physical blow. "That's why he was so eager to find his mate. He's running out of time." "No." Sarah turned to face her fully. "That's why he was so eager to find you specifically. There's more to your family history than you know, Lila. More than even your parents told you." "What do you mean?" "Your grandmother was a healer. Not just someone who knew about herbs and natural remedies, but someone with real power. The kind of power that comes from the moon goddess herself." Sarah's eyes searched Lila's face. "That power runs in bloodlines, Lila. It can skip generations, but it never disappears completely." Lila thought about the strange dreams she'd been having, the way her hands had glowed faintly when she'd healed the wounded warrior on her first day. "You think I have this power? I think you're the key to breaking the curse on our family. And I think Damon has known that since you were children." Sarah's expression grew fierce. "But that doesn't make his feelings for you any less real. I've watched my brother close himself off from everyone and everything because he was afraid to love someone he might leave behind. You're the first person who's ever made him believe he might have a future worth fighting for." Before Lila could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps made them both turn. Damon emerged from the tree line, his face etched with worry and determination. "I've been looking everywhere for you," he said, his relief evident as his eyes found hers. "I needed space to think," Lila replied, though her anger had cooled somewhat after her conversation with Sarah. "And what did you decide?" Lila studied his face, the sharp cheekbones, the silver eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul, the mouth that had kissed her with such desperate passion. Sarah was right. Whatever had brought them together initially, what she saw in his expression now was genuine emotion, not duty. "I decided that we need to be completely honest with each other from now on," she said finally. "No more protecting me from truths you think I can't handle. No more secrets." Relief flooded Damon's features. "I can agree to that." "Good. Then start by telling me everything. About the curse, about my family's power, about whatever else you've been keeping from me." Damon glanced at his sister, who nodded encouragingly, then sat on the ground in front of the log so he could look directly into Lila's eyes. "The curse was placed on our family by a witch named Morgana centuries ago," he began. "She was in love with one of my ancestors, but he rejected her for his true mate. In her rage, she cursed his bloodline so that no Blackthorne alpha would ever live long enough to see his children grow up." "That's horrible," Lila whispered. "For generations, my family has searched for a way to break the curse. We've consulted with healers, witches, anyone who might have knowledge about such things. The answer was always the same: only a healer with divine blood could break a curse that strong." "Divine blood? Your grandmother wasn't just a healer, Lila. She was descended from wolves who were blessed by the moon goddess herself. That bloodline is incredibly rare, and the power often lies dormant for generations before manifesting again." Lila's mind raced as pieces of her life suddenly made sense. "The dreams I've been having. The way I healed that warrior without meaning to. You think I inherited her power?" "I know you did," Damon said softly. "I've felt it from the moment I first touched you. The way your power calls to mine, the way our wolves recognize each other as perfect matches. You're not just my mate, Lila. You're my salvation. The words should have made her angry. The implication that he needed her for something beyond love should have felt like another betrayal. But instead, Lila felt a sense of rightness settle in her chest. She thought about the way her wolf had immediately trusted Damon, the way their bond felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. What happens if I can't break the curse? She asked quietly. Pain flickered in Damon's eyes. Then I'll make the most of whatever time I have left. And I'll spend every moment of it loving you the way you deserve to be loved. The simple honesty of his words broke through the last of her defenses. This man, this powerful, dangerous, beautiful man, was offering her his heart even knowing that their time together might be limited. How could she do anything but offer hers in return? Teach me, she said. Teach me how to access my power. Help me learn to break the curse. Hope blazed in Damon's silver eyes. Are you sure? The training will be intense, and there's no guarantee it will work. I'm sure. Lila reached out and took his hands, feeling the familiar spark of connection jump between them. We're mates, Damon. We face everything together. His smile was brilliant and relieved and so full of love that it took her breath away. Together, he agreed, bringing her hands to his lips and pressing gentle kisses to her knuckles. As they sat by the waterfall making plans for her training, Lila felt a sense of purpose settle in her chest. She was no longer just the wolfless girl who'd been rejected by her intended mate. She was a healer, a woman with power and purpose, and she was exactly where she belonged. But even as contentment filled her, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered a warning. Breaking ancient curses was dangerous work, and there were always those who would try to stop them. She thought about Jake's final words before he'd left Shadow Ridge territory, the possessive fury in his eyes and the way he'd looked at her like she was something he owned rather than someone he loved. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she had the feeling Jake Morrison was going to be the least of their problems. But for now, she pushed those worries aside and focused on the man beside her, on the mate bond that grew stronger with each passing moment, and on the future they were going to build together. No matter what it took. #. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to support this channel. Chapter 4. 2 weeks had passed since Lila's discovery in the library, and her training had begun in earnest. Every morning, she worked with Elena to develop her healing abilities, learning to channel the power that flowed through her veins like liquid moonlight. Every afternoon, she trained with Damon to strengthen her body and her fighting skills, preparing for the battles that might come. But it was the evenings that proved most challenging, when she and Damon worked together in the Pack's ancient library, poring over texts about curse-breaking and divine magic. The research was painstaking and often frustrating, but Lila was determined to master every aspect of her newfound abilities. Try again, Elena encouraged, her weathered hands gentle as she guided Lila's palms over a rabbit that had been injured by a hawk. Don't force the power. Let it flow naturally. Lila closed her eyes and reached deep inside herself, searching for the warm golden light that seemed to live just beneath her skin. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, gradually, she felt the familiar tingling in her fingertips as power began to flow through her hands. The rabbit's wounds closed slowly, new fur growing to cover the healed skin. When Lila opened her eyes, the small animal was whole and healthy, its dark eyes bright with renewed vitality. Excellent, Elena said with satisfaction. Your control is improving dramatically. You're ready for the next phase of training. What's the next phase? Elena's expression grew serious. Learning to heal not just physical wounds, but spiritual ones. Curses are wounds inflicted on the soul itself, and breaking them requires a different kind of power. That evening, Lila sat across from Damon in the library, a collection of ancient texts spread between them on the heavy wooden table. The books were written in languages that predated modern werewolf dialects, and many of the concepts they described were almost impossible to understand. Here, Damon said, pointing to a passage in a particularly old tome. This talks about the White Wolf, a legendary healer said to appear once every 1,000 years to restore balance to the werewolf world. Lila leaned closer to read the text, her shoulder brushing against Damon's arm and sending the familiar spark of awareness through her body. Even after weeks of growing closer, the mate bond between them continued to intensify, making every casual touch feel electric. "The white wolf shall be born with moonlight in her veins and healing in her hands," she read aloud. "She will unite the divided and heal the wounded, bringing peace where there was war and hope where there was despair." "Keep reading," Damon encouraged. "But the white wolf's greatest test will come when she must choose between her own happiness and the greater good. For only through sacrifice can the deepest curses be broken, and only through love can the greatest healing be achieved." A chill ran down Lila's spine at the ominous words. "That doesn't sound very encouraging." "Prophecies rarely are," Damon said grimly. "But they're also notoriously vague. Sacrifice doesn't necessarily mean death, and choosing between happiness and the greater good could mean any number of things." Lila closed the book and leaned back in her chair, rubbing her tired eyes. "Sometimes I wonder if we're chasing shadows, Damon. What if I'm not the white wolf? What if I'm just a girl with some minor healing ability who's in way over her head?" "You're not," Damon said with absolute certainty. "I can feel your power growing stronger every day. The way you healed that rabbit today, the way your hands glow when you're channeling energy. You're definitely more than just a girl with minor abilities." As if to prove his point, Lila looked down at her hands and saw the faint golden shimmer that had become increasingly visible over the past few days. The power was definitely growing stronger, but with it came a sense of responsibility that sometimes felt overwhelming. "What if I'm not strong enough?" she asked quietly. "What if I can't break the curse, and you?" "Hey." Damon reached across the table and took her hands in his touch immediately calming her fears. "We're not going to think about that. We're going to focus on the training, on building your abilities, and on finding a way to make this work." The determination in his voice was absolute, but Lila could see the shadow of worry in his silver eyes. His 30th birthday was only 3 months away, and while he tried to hide his growing anxiety, she could feel it through their mate bond. Besides, Damon continued with a smile that was meant to be reassuring, "I have faith in you. More faith than I've ever had in anything." Before Lila could respond, a commotion outside the library window caught their attention. Raised voices and the sound of running feet echoed across the pack grounds, and through the mate bond, Lila felt Damon's immediate shift to high alert. "Stay here," he commanded, rising from his chair with fluid grace. "Like hell," Lila replied, standing as well. "If there's trouble, I'm not hiding in the library." Damon looked like he wanted to argue, but another shout from outside made him nod grimly. "Fine. But you stay behind me." They rushed outside to find the pack in chaos. Warriors were running toward the perimeter, and Sarah was coordinating evacuation procedures for the families with young children. In the distance, Lila could see smoke rising from the direction of the village. "What's happening?" Damon demanded as they reached Sarah. "Rogue attack on the eastern border," Sarah replied, her face pale with worry. "At least 20 of them, maybe more. They've already burned 3 houses and injured several pack members." Damon's expression hardened into something deadly. "Casualties?" "Marcus Thompson is badly hurt, clawed across the chest and losing a lot of blood. Elena's with him now, but..." Sarah's voice trailed off, and Lila could see the fear in her eyes. Without thinking, Lila started toward the village. "I can help him." "Lila, no." Damon caught her arm, his grip gentle but firm. "It's too dangerous. The rogues could still be in the area." "People are hurt," Lila said, pulling free of his grasp. "I have healing abilities. How can I hide in safety while pack members are dying?" The conviction in her voice seemed to surprise Damon. For a moment, he stared at her with an expression of pride and worry warring on his face. Then he nodded decisively. "Fine. But you don't go anywhere alone, and you follow my orders without question." "Understood." "Understood." They made their way quickly through the village, where the acrid smell of smoke hung heavy in the air. Several houses showed signs of damage, and Lila could see pack members working frantically to put out the remaining fires. But it was the scent of blood that made her stomach clench with dread. Elena met them at Marcus Thompson's house, her face grim and her hands stained with blood. "How is he?" Damon asked immediately. "Bad," Elena replied bluntly. "The claws went deep, and he's lost too much blood. I've done what I can, but—" She shook her head helplessly. Lila pushed past them both and into the house, following the scent of blood and fear to a bedroom where a middle-aged man lay unconscious on blood-soaked sheets. His chest was torn open in 4 parallel gashes, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Without hesitation, Lila knelt beside the bed and placed her hands over the worst of the wounds. Immediately, power flowed through her fingertips, stronger than she'd ever felt it before, as if the urgency of the situation had unlocked something deeper within her abilities. Golden light poured from her hands, and she watched in amazement as the torn flesh began to knit itself back together. The bleeding stopped first, then the deeper tissues began to heal, and finally new skin grew to cover the injuries completely. When the healing was finished, Marcus's breathing had returned to normal, and his color was much improved. He would live, and without even a scar to show for his ordeal. "Incredible," Elena breathed from the doorway. "I've never seen anything like it." But Lila barely heard her. The healing had drained her more than usual, and she felt oddly lightheaded. As she tried to stand, the room began to spin around her. "Lila!" Damon caught her as she swayed, his arms strong and steady around her. "What's wrong?" "Just tired," she managed, though she felt like she might faint. The healing was more intense than usual. "That's because you're accessing deeper levels of your power," Elena explained, moving to check her pulse and look into her eyes. "It's a good sign. It means your abilities are growing stronger. But it also means you need to be more careful about overextending yourself." Damon swept Lila up in his arms, cradling her against his chest. "You're going straight to bed. No arguments. But there might be other injured pack members." "The others can wait until you've recovered," Damon said firmly. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion." As they made their way back to the pack house, Lila caught sight of something that made her blood run cold. At the edge of the forest, barely visible in the shadows, stood a figure watching them. Even from a distance, she could see the flash of sandy brown hair and the distinctive posture that she recognized all too well. "Damon," she whispered urgently. "Jake's here." Damon's head snapped up, his eyes scanning the tree line until he spotted the figure. His expression darkened with fury, and Lila felt his wolf pressing against his control. "What the hell is he doing on our territory?" Damon growled. Before Lila could answer, Jake stepped out of the shadows, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. But there was something about his appearance that set off alarm bells in Lila's mind. His clothes were torn and dirty, there were scratches on his face and arms, and his eyes held a wild, desperate look that she'd never seen before. "I need to talk to Lila," Jake called out, his voice carrying across the distance between them. "It's important." "You have nothing to say that she needs to hear," Damon replied coldly, setting Lila gently on her feet but keeping a protective arm around her waist. "This concerns her safety," Jake insisted, taking a few steps closer. "There are things happening that she doesn't know about. Things that put her in danger." Despite her exhaustion, Lila felt a chill of foreboding. "What kind of things?" "Lila, don't listen to him," Damon warned. "He's trying to manipulate you." But Jake's next words made her blood freeze in her veins. "The rogue attack tonight wasn't random," he said, his green eyes locked on hers with desperate intensity. "They were looking for something specific. Someone specific." His gaze flicked meaningfully to her hands, which still held a faint golden glow from the healing she performed. "Word is spreading about a white wolf with healing powers. There are people who would do anything to possess that kind of ability." "You're lying," Damon snarled, but Lila could feel his uncertainty through their mate bond. "Am I?" Jake challenged. "Ask your scouts about the rogue's behavior tonight. Ask them if the attackers seemed more interested in finding someone than in actually destroying the village." Damon's jaw clenched, and Lila realized that Jake's words had hit uncomfortably close to home. The rogue attack had been unusual, more focused on causing chaos and drawing attention than on actually inflicting maximum damage. Even if that's true, Lila said slowly, what does it have to do with you? Why should I trust anything you say after what you did to me? Pain flickered across Jake's features. Because despite everything that's happened between us, I still care about you, Lila. And I know things about the people who are looking for you that Damon doesn't. What people? Damon demanded. Jake hesitated, his eyes darting nervously around the clearing as if he expected to be overheard. There's a witch, he said finally. An old one, with power beyond anything you can imagine. She's been searching for a white wolf healer for decades, and she's willing to pay any price to get one. Morgana, Elena breathed from behind them, having followed them out of the house. He's talking about Morgana. The blood drained from Damon's face. That's impossible. Morgana died centuries ago. Did she? Jake asked grimly. Or did she just find a way to extend her life by feeding off the power of others? Lila felt a cold knot of dread form in her stomach. What does she want with me? Your power, Jake said simply. All of it. She believes that by draining the life force of a white wolf healer, she can break the aging curse that's slowly killing her and become truly immortal. The implications hit Lila like a physical blow. And you know this how? Jake's expression grew haunted. Because she approached me weeks ago. She offered me everything I ever wanted, power, territory, the ability to defeat Damon and claim you as my mate, if I would help her capture you. Silence stretched between them as the full horror of his confession sank in. Damon's growl was low and dangerous, and Lila could feel his barely restrained violence through their bond. And? Damon asked, his voice deadly quiet. And I told her no, Jake said, meeting Damon's furious gaze without flinching. Whatever you think of me, whatever I've done wrong, would never betray Lila to someone who wants to hurt her. Your rejection of me was pretty effective betrayal, Lila pointed out bitterly. I know, Jake said, his voice thick with regret. And I'll regret that moment for the rest of my life. But rejecting you and handing you over to a psychotic, which are two very different things. Why should we believe you? Damon demanded. Jake reached slowly into his jacket and pulled out a small object that gleamed silver in the moonlight. As he held it up, Lila could see that it was some kind of amulet covered in strange symbols. Because she gave me this when I refused to help her, Jake said. It's supposed to protect me from her magic when she comes looking for revenge. But I think Lila needs it more than I do. He tossed the amulet to Damon, who caught it reflexively. The moment the silver touched his skin, he hissed and nearly dropped it, steam rising from his palm. It's been blessed with protective magic, Elena said, moving closer to examine the amulet without touching it. Very old, very powerful magic. The kind that could indeed offer protection against someone like Morgana. Keep it, Jake said, his eyes fixed on Lila's face. Consider it my apology for everything I put you through. Before anyone could respond, a bone-chilling howl echoed through the forest, not the call of a wolf, but something far more unnatural and terrifying. The sound made every hair on Lila's body stand on end, and she instinctively pressed closer to Damon's side. She's coming, Jake said, his face pale with terror. Morgana's coming, and she's bringing her creatures with her. As if summoned by his words, shapes began moving through the trees, not rogues this time, but something far worse. Lila caught glimpses of glowing red eyes and forms that seemed to shift and writhe like living shadows. Get back to the pack house, Damon ordered, his alpha authority ringing in his voice. Now. As they ran toward safety, Lila couldn't shake the feeling that their time of peace and training was over. The real battle for her life, and her soul, was about to begin. And despite Jake's warning and the protective amulet, she wasn't sure any of them were ready for what was coming. The White Wolf prophecy was about to be put to the ultimate test. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to support this channel. Chapter 5. The pack house had been transformed into a fortress overnight. Warriors patrolled every entrance, silver weapons gleamed in their hands, and protective wards, hastily drawn by Elena using knowledge from the oldest texts, covered every window and door. The scent of fear hung heavy in the air, mixed with the sharper smell of determination and barely controlled violence. Lila sat in the great room, the silver amulet Jake had given her lying on the table before her like a poisonous snake. Every few minutes, she could feel its power pulsing against her senses, offering protection she wasn't sure she could trust. "Anything?" she asked as Damon returned from yet another security briefing with his warriors. "The creatures retreated at dawn," he reported, settling beside her on the massive leather couch. "But they're still out there, watching and waiting. Our scouts count at least 50 of them surrounding the territory." 50? Lila's voice came out as a whisper. "What exactly are they?" "Shadow wraiths," Elena said grimly from her position by the fireplace, where she was brewing some kind of protective potion. "Souls of the dead bound to serve Morgana through dark magic. They're nearly impossible to kill with conventional weapons, and they can drain the life force from anyone they touch." The description made Lila's skin crawl. "And they're all here for me. We won't let them have you," Damon said fiercely, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "Whatever it takes, we'll keep you safe." Before Lila could respond, a commotion outside made them all tense. Through the great room windows, they could see Silver Moon warriors approaching under a white flag of truce. At their head walked Jake, his face grim but determined. "What the hell does he want now?" Damon growled, rising to his feet. "Let's find out," Lila said, standing as well despite Damon's protective instincts. They met Jake and his small contingent of warriors on the front porch of the pack house. In the daylight, Jake looked even worse than he had the night before, dark circles under his eyes, a haunted expression, and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that spoke of sleepless nights and constant fear. "Morgana visited me again last night," Jake said without preamble. "After the shadow wraiths retreated. She's not happy that I warned you." "I imagine not," Damon replied coldly. "What did she want?" "To make me a new offer." Jake's green eyes found Lila's, and she could see genuine fear in their depths. "A better offer. One that I'm ashamed to say I was tempted by." "Which was?" Lila asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "You," Jake said simply. "Not permanently. Just long enough for her to drain your power and achieve immortality. In exchange, she promised to break whatever hold you have over me and make me forget I ever wanted you." The words hit Lila like a slap. "Hold I have over you?" "Jake, you rejected me, remember?" "I know," Jake said miserably. "And I've regretted it every moment since. The truth is, Lila, I never stopped wanting you. I never stopped thinking about you. Even when I was with Melissa, even when I was trying to convince myself I'd made the right choice, all I could think about was how perfect you looked in that white dress and how much I wanted to be the one claiming you." "Then why?" Lila demanded, anger flaring in her chest. "Why did you humiliate me like that? Why did you call me weak and worthless?" Jake's face crumpled with shame. "Because Melissa threatened to expose something that would have destroyed my family's reputation if it came out. Something about my father's business dealings that would have cost him his position as alpha. So you sacrificed me to protect your father's secrets?" The betrayal cut even deeper than his original rejection. "I was young and stupid and scared," Jake said desperately. I thought maybe if I rejected you publicly, you'd hate me enough to move on. Find someone who deserved you. I never imagined you'd end up with him." His gaze flicked to Damon with obvious resentment. "Enough," Damon snarled, stepping protectively in front of Lila. "You made your choice, Morrison. Live with it." "But that's just it," Jake said, his voice growing more desperate. "I can't live with it. Do you know what it's like to watch the woman you love fall in love with someone else? To see her looking at him the way she used to look at you?" "The way she never looked at you," Damon corrected coldly. "What Lila and I have is real, Morrison. It's not some childhood infatuation or political arrangement. It's a true mate bond, blessed by the moon goddess herself." "Is it?" Jake challenged. "Or is it just convenient? You needed a white wolf healer to break your family curse, and she needed someone to rescue her from the humiliation I caused. How do you know what you feel for each other is real and not just mutual desperation? The question hung in the air like a poisonous cloud, and Lila felt something cold and terrible settle in her stomach. Was Jake right? Had her feelings for Damon grown out of gratitude rather than genuine love? Had Damon's protective instincts toward her been motivated by his need for a cure rather than true affection? "Don't listen to him," Damon said, turning to face her with desperation in his silver eyes. "He's trying to manipulate you, trying to make you doubt what we have." "Am I?" Jake asked. "Lila, be honest with yourself. 3 weeks ago, you thought I was your destined mate. You were planning to spend your life with me. How can you be so sure that what you feel for Damon is real when your feelings changed so quickly?" "Because of this," Lila said, stepping closer to Damon and placing her hand over his heart. Immediately, the mate bond flared to life between them, sending warmth and certainty flooding through her veins. "Jake, what I felt for you was comfortable and familiar. It was the kind of love that grows from shared childhood memories and expectations. But what I feel for Damon..." She looked up into his silver eyes and saw her own emotions reflected back at her. "It's like coming home after a lifetime of being lost. It's like finding the other half of my soul." Relief flooded Damon's features, and he pulled her against his chest, his arms wrapping around her like he never wanted to let her go. "Pretty words," Jake said bitterly. "But what happens when the crisis is over? When the curse is broken and the immediate danger has passed? Will you still feel the same way about each other when you're not united by a common enemy?" "We'll find out," Lila said firmly. "But I'm not going to throw away my happiness based on your jealousy and regret." Jake's face twisted with pain and anger. "Fine. Have it your way. But when Morgana comes for you, and she will come, don't expect me to risk my pack's safety to save you again." "We never asked you to," Damon replied coldly. Jake turned to leave, then paused and looked back at Lila one last time. "I hope you're right about him, Lila. I hope what you have is real. Because if it's not, you're going to pay a very high price for your mistake." As the Silver Moon warriors departed, Lila felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. Jake's words had planted seeds of doubt in her mind, questions about her own feelings and motivations that she didn't want to examine too closely. "He's wrong," Damon said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "What we have is real, Lila. I've never felt anything like it before." "How can you be sure?" she asked, hating herself for the doubt in her voice. "You said yourself that you've been looking for a white wolf healer your whole life. How do you know you're not just confusing gratitude with love?" Damon cupped her face in his hands, his silver eyes burning with intensity. "Because of this," he said, echoing her earlier words. Then he kissed her with a passion that stole her breath and made her forget everything else. When they finally broke apart, Lila was breathless and dizzy, her entire body humming with awareness and desire. Whatever else might be uncertain in her life, this connection between them was undeniably real. "Does that feel like gratitude to you?" Damon asked, his voice rough with emotion. "No," Lila whispered. "It feels like love." "Then trust it," he urged. "Trust us. Don't let Morrison's jealousy poison what we've built together." Lila nodded, pushing aside her doubts and focusing on the warmth of the mate bond that connected them. Jake was wrong. What she and Damon had was real and true and worth fighting for. But even as she made that mental declaration, a part of her couldn't help wondering what would happen when the immediate crisis was over. Would their love survive in peacetime, or was it just a product of the intense circumstances that had brought them together? She pushed the thoughts away and focused on the present. Right now, Morgana was out there planning to capture her, and Damon was the only thing standing between her and a fate worse than death. Everything else could wait until they survived the coming storm. "What's our next move?" she asked, settling back into his arms. "We prepare for war," Damon said grimly. "And we hope that when the time comes, your power is strong enough to protect us all." As if summoned by his words, another bone-chilling howl echoed across the territory, closer this time than before. The shadow wraiths were growing bolder, and Lila had the sinking feeling that their time was running out. Soon, very soon, she would have to face Morgana and discover whether she truly was the White Wolf of prophecy or just a girl with healing abilities who was in way over her head. The answer would determine not just her fate, but the fate of everyone she'd come to love. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to support this channel. Chapter 6, Betrayal and Capture. For 3 days, Shadow Ridge Pack lived under siege. The Shadow Wraiths maintained their perimeter around the territory, never attacking directly but never retreating either. They were waiting for something, or someone, and the constant tension was beginning to wear on everyone's nerves. Lila had thrown herself into training with desperate intensity, working with Elena to strengthen her healing abilities and with Damon to improve her combat skills. Every moment felt precious now, every lesson potentially the difference between life and death when the final confrontation came. It was on the 4th morning that everything went wrong. Lila woke to find Damon's side of the bed cold and empty, which was unusual since he'd taken to staying close to her at all times. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, expecting to find him in the kitchen having coffee with Sarah. Instead, she found Sarah pacing frantically in the great room, her face pale with worry. "Sarah? What's wrong? Where's Damon?" "He got a message early this morning," Sarah said, her voice tight with anxiety. "One of our patrol scouts was found badly injured near the eastern border." Damon went to investigate. A cold knot of dread formed in Lila's stomach. "When?" "2 hours ago. He should have been back by now." Lila tried to reach out through the mate bond, searching for the familiar warmth of Damon's presence. What she found instead was a strange, muffled silence, as if something was blocking their connection. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't feel him through our bond." Sarah's face went ashen. "That's not possible. The mate bond can only be severed by death or powerful magic," Lila finished, her blood turning to ice. "Morgana." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion outside drew their attention. Through the great room windows, they could see a lone figure approaching the pack house, a young woman Lila didn't recognize, stumbling and clearly injured. "Help me," the woman called out as Sarah and Lila rushed outside. "Please, they have him. They have your alpha." Lila's heart stopped beating. "What are you talking about? Who has him?" "The witch," the woman gasped, collapsing to her knees. "Morgana. She set a trap. The injured scout was bait. When your alpha went to help, she was waiting with her creatures." "Where?" Sarah demanded. "Where did they take him?" "The old mine," the woman replied. "About 5 miles north of here. But it's heavily guarded. She has dozens of shadow wraiths, and..." She paused, her eyes filling with fear. "She has Jake Morrison with her." "Jake?" Lila couldn't hide her shock. "But he warned us about Morgana. He gave us the protective amulet." "It was all a lie," the woman said miserably. "I heard them talking. He's been working with her from the beginning. The amulet was fake, meant to make you trust him. The warnings about the shadow wraiths were designed to make you lower your guard." The betrayal hit Lila like a physical blow. Jake had played her perfectly, using her own compassion and their shared history to manipulate her into believing his lies. "There's more," the woman continued. "Morgana isn't just after your power. She wants to use your mate's life to force you to cooperate. She says if you don't come to her willingly by sunset, she'll kill him slowly and make you watch through her magic." Lila felt something cold and deadly settle in her chest. "Then I guess I'm going to the mine." "Lila, no," Sarah said desperately. "It's obviously a trap. If you go there, you'll be giving Morgana exactly what she wants." "She already has exactly what she wants," Lila replied, her voice eerily calm. "She has Damon. And I won't let him die because of me. You'll both die if you go there alone. Wait for the warriors to return from patrol. We can mount a rescue." "There's no time," Lila interrupted. "And besides, this was always going to be my fight. The prophecy said the White Wolf would face her greatest test alone. She turned and walked back into the pack house, her mind already working on a plan. Sarah followed, still trying to talk her out of what she clearly considered a suicide mission. At least take some of the warriors with you, Sarah pleaded. Don't go completely alone. Warriors can't help against shadow wraiths, Lila said, gathering supplies from the emergency kit Damon had insisted she keep in their room. Physical weapons are useless against creatures made of magic and malice. Then how do you plan to fight them? Lila looked down at her hands, where the faint golden glow was already beginning to build as her power responded to her emotional state. With everything I have. She grabbed the silver amulet Jake had given her, fake or not, it might still provide some protection, and headed for the door. Sarah caught her arm as she reached the threshold. Lila, please. Think about this. Damon wouldn't want you to sacrifice yourself for him. And I won't let him sacrifice himself for me, Lila replied firmly. We're mates, Sarah. We protect each other, no matter the cost. The injured woman, who had been silent during their argument, suddenly spoke up. There's something else you should know. Morgana isn't planning to kill you quickly. She wants to drain your power slowly, over several days. She believes that will give her more time to absorb your abilities completely. Good, Lila said grimly. That gives me time to work. She left the pack house before Sarah could stop her, shifting into her wolf form for the first time since arriving at Shadow Ridge. Her wolf was smaller than most, with silver-white fur that seemed to glow in the afternoon sunlight, but she was fast and agile, built for endurance rather than brute strength. The 5-mile run to the old mine gave her time to think and plan. Morgana was clearly powerful, but she was also arrogant. She expected Lila to come charging in like an untrained fool, driven by emotion rather than strategy. She was about to be very surprised. The mine was exactly where the woman had said it would be, a series of abandoned tunnels carved into the side of a hill, now overgrown with vines and surrounded by the twisted remains of old mining equipment. Shadow wraiths patrolled the perimeter, their red eyes glowing like malevolent stars in the gathering dusk. Lila circled the area carefully, using her heightened senses to map out the defenses and look for weaknesses. What she found was discouraging. The entire area was saturated with dark magic, and the number of shadow wraiths was even higher than the woman had indicated. But she also found something else, a network of old mining tunnels that connected to the main cave system. If she could access them from a different angle, she might be able to get inside without fighting through the main defenses. It took her another hour to find an entrance to the tunnel system that wasn't guarded. The opening was narrow and partially collapsed, barely large enough for her wolf form to squeeze through, but it led in the right direction. The tunnels were pitch black and filled with the scent of old earth and decay, but Lila's wolf senses guided her through the maze of passages. As she got closer to the main cavern, she began to hear voices, and one of them made her blood boil with rage. She'll come, Jake was saying, his voice echoing off the stone walls. She's too soft-hearted to let her precious mate die, even if it means walking into a trap. And if she doesn't? This voice was older, female, and carried an undertone of power that made Lila's skin crawl. She will, Jake replied confidently. I know her better than anyone. She's always been too willing to sacrifice herself for others. Good, the woman, Morgana, purred. I do so hate it when my meals put up too much of a fight. Lila reached the end of the tunnel and found herself looking out into a vast cavern lit by dozens of flickering torches. In the center of the space, Damon was chained to a stone pillar, silver shackles around his wrists and ankles that prevented him from shifting. His head was hanging forward, and Lila could see dark bruises on his face and arms where he'd been beaten. Morgana stood nearby, and the sight of her made Lila's blood run cold. She appeared to be in her 40s, with long black hair and pale skin, but there was something ancient and terrible in her dark eyes. She wore a flowing black robe covered in symbols that seemed to writhe and move in the torchlight. Jake paced restlessly near the cavern entrance, occasionally glancing toward the tunnels as if he expected Lila to appear at any moment. His appearance had changed dramatically since their last meeting. His eyes held a wild, desperate gleam, and there were dark veins visible beneath his skin that suggested he'd been dabbling in magic far beyond his understanding. Perhaps we should send her another message, Morgana suggested, moving closer to Damon. Something to encourage her to hurry. She raised her hand, and dark energy crackled around her fingers. Damon's head snapped up as the magic hit him, his body convulsing in obvious agony. A roar of pain echoed through the cavern, and Lila had to bite her tongue to keep from crying out in response. "Stop," she called, stepping out of the tunnel and into the torchlight. "I'm here. Let him go." Morgana's smile was cold and predatory. "The little white wolf arrives at last." "How predictable." "I said let him go," Lila repeated, power beginning to build in her hands as her anger grew. "Oh, I don't think so," Morgana replied. "You see, dear child, I need him alive to ensure your cooperation. Without proper motivation, you might try to do something foolish like fight back." "What do you want?" "What I've always wanted. Your power." Morgana gestured, and shadow wraiths began to emerge from the darker corners of the cavern, surrounding Lila with their glowing red eyes and reaching claws. "All of it. Every last drop of divine energy flowing through your veins. And if I give it to you willingly, you'll let Damon go?" Morgana's laugh was like broken glass. "My dear foolish child, I'm going to drain your power whether you cooperate or not. The only question is whether your mate dies quickly or slowly." The casual cruelty in her voice snapped something inside Lila. Power exploded outward from her body in a wave of golden light that sent the shadow wraiths skittering backward with shrieks of pain. "Wrong answer," Lila snarled, her eyes blazing with divine fire. The final battle was about to begin. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to support this channel. Chapter 7. The cavern erupted into chaos as Lila's power clashed with Morgana's dark magic. Golden light blazed against shadows, and the ancient stone walls shook with the force of their supernatural battle. Shadow wraiths shrieked and writhed as Lila's divine energy burned through them like acid, but for every one she destroyed, 2 more seemed to take its place. "Impressive," Morgana called out over the din of battle, her voice carrying an undertone of genuine respect. "But raw power without training is ultimately useless, child." She gestured sharply, and the remaining shadow wraiths converged on Lila from all sides. Claws of living darkness raked across her arms and shoulders, their touch burning like ice and draining her strength with every contact. Lila stumbled, her golden light flickering as pain and exhaustion began to take their toll. "Lila." Damon's voice cut through the chaos, filled with desperate fear for her safety. The sound of his voice gave her strength, and she pushed back against the shadow wraiths with renewed determination. But she was fighting a losing battle. There were simply too many of them, and each wound they inflicted made her weaker while Morgana stood safely behind her army of darkness, gathering power for some greater spell. "Jake!" Morgana snapped. "Make yourself useful and restrain her." Jake shifted into his wolf form and lunged toward Lila, his sandy brown coat bristling with aggression. But as he leaped, something unexpected happened. Instead of attacking Lila, he turned at the last moment and threw himself at the shadow wraiths surrounding her. His claws and teeth did little damage to the magical creatures, but his intervention gave Lila the breathing room she needed to regroup. She stared at him in shock as he stood between her and the wraiths, his wolf form trembling with effort. "Jake? What are you doing?" He shifted back to human form, blood streaming from multiple wounds where the shadow wraiths had retaliated for his interference. "Something I should have done weeks ago," he gasped. "The right thing." "You fool." Morgana snarled, her face contorting with rage. "You'll ruin everything." "Good," Jake replied, though his voice was weak with pain and blood loss. "Lila, the chains holding Damon, they're keyed to my blood. I'm the only one who can release them." "Why?" Lila asked, even as she moved to cover him from another wave of attacking wraiths. "Why help us now?" "Because I finally remembered what it means to be an alpha," Jake said, staggering toward the stone pillar where Damon was chained. "An alpha protects his pack, even if that pack no longer includes him." Morgana's scream of fury echoed through the cavern as she realized what Jake was doing. Dark energy crackled around her fingers as she prepared to strike him down, but Lila threw herself between them, her golden light blazing brighter than ever before. You want my power so badly? Lila shouted, her voice ringing with divine authority. Then come and take it. The challenge seemed to snap something inside Morgana. Her careful strategy abandoned, she launched herself directly at Lila with claws of pure shadow and eyes that burned like black fire. The two women collided in the center of the cavern, power meeting power in an explosion that sent shock waves through the ancient stone. Behind them, Jake reached Damon's chains and pressed his bleeding palm against the silver locks. They opened with a soft click, and Damon stumbled free, his strength slowly returning as the silver's poisonous effects began to fade. Can you fight? Jake asked, though he could barely stand himself. Try and stop me, Damon growled, his silver eyes blazing with fury as he took in the scene before him, his mate locked in deadly combat with a creature of pure malevolence. Morgana and Lila were moving faster than human eyes could follow, their battle creating a whirlwind of light and shadow that consumed everything around them. But even with all her power, Lila was losing ground. Morgana had centuries of experience and knowledge that Lila simply couldn't match. She's too strong, Lila gasped as Morgana's claws raked across her ribs, leaving burning trails of darkness in her flesh. I can't. Yes, you can, Damon said, his voice cutting through her despair with absolute certainty. You're the white wolf, Lila. You're stronger than you know. But even as he spoke, Morgana managed to land a devastating blow that sent Lila crashing into the cavern wall. The witch advanced on her fallen opponent with predatory satisfaction, dark energy building around her hands. Time to end this charade, Morgana purred. Hold still, little wolf. This will only hurt for the first few hours. She reached out with claws of pure shadow, aiming for Lila's heart where her divine power burned brightest. But just as the attack was about to land, something extraordinary happened. The mate bond between Lila and Damon flared to life with unprecedented intensity, their combined strength flowing between them like molten gold. Lila's eyes blazed with silver fire, not golden anymore, but the pure silver of moonlight itself, and power erupted from her body in a wave that sent Morgana flying backward. That's not possible, Morgana snarled, picking herself up from the cavern floor. Your power is healing magic, not combat magic. My power is love, Lila said, rising to her feet as divine energy coursed through her veins like liquid starlight. And love is the strongest magic of all. She looked at Damon, and in that moment, she understood what the prophecy had meant. The greatest sacrifice wasn't giving up her life, it was giving up her fear, her doubt, her need to face everything alone. The white wolf's power wasn't meant to be wielded in isolation. It was meant to be shared, amplified by the bonds of love and trust that connected her to those who mattered most. Together, she asked, extending her hand to Damon. Always, he replied without hesitation, taking her hand and letting their combined power flow between them. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Silver-white light blazed from their joined hands, and when it touched the shadow wraiths, they didn't just retreat, they were purified, their twisted forms dissolving into wisps of peaceful energy that dispersed harmlessly into the night air. Morgana's face contorted with rage and fear as she realized what was happening. No. I won't be denied. I've waited too long, sacrificed too much. She began chanting in an ancient language, her voice rising to a shriek as she poured every ounce of her accumulated power into one final, desperate attack. The very air around her began to tear and warp as she called upon forces that should never have been disturbed. She's trying to open a rift to the shadow realm, Jake warned, his voice weak but urgent. If she succeeds, she'll be able to summon enough darkness to destroy everything within 100 miles. Lila and Damon exchanged a look of grim understanding. There was only one way to stop Morgana now, and it would require everything they had. The curse, Lila said suddenly, realization dawning in her eyes. Damon, the curse on your bloodline, Morgana cast it. If I can break it completely, the backlash might be enough to stop her. But that kind of magic, Damon began. Could kill me, yes, Lila finished. But it's the only way. Damon's face went pale. Lila, no. We'll find another way. There is no other way, she said softly, cupping his face in her free hand. And I won't let her destroy everything we've fought for. Before Damon could protest further, Lila closed her eyes and reached deep into the wellspring of power that flowed through her veins. She found the dark threads of Morgana's curse wrapped around Damon's life force like poisonous vines, and she began to unravel them one by one. The process was agony. Each thread she destroyed sent waves of pain through her body, and she could feel her life force being drained with every severed connection. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Not when Damon's life hung in the balance. "What are you doing?" Morgana shrieked, her ritual faltering as she felt her ancient magic being systematically destroyed. "Stop. You don't understand what you're unleashing." But Lila was beyond hearing her now. She was lost in the magic, following the curse back to its source, unmaking centuries of dark work with pure divine will. And as the last thread of the curse snapped under her assault, something incredible happened. The power that had been locked away by Morgana's curse came flooding back to the Blackthorne bloodline, not just Damon's power, but the accumulated strength of all the alphas who had died before their time. It poured into Lila and through her into Damon, creating a feedback loop of energy that blazed like a miniature sun. Morgana's scream of rage and fear was cut short as the backlash of her broken curse slammed into her with the force of a thunderbolt. Her body began to age rapidly, centuries of stolen time catching up with her in moments. Her black hair turned white, her smooth skin wrinkled and sagged, and her eyes dimmed from burning black to pale gray. "This isn't over," she croaked, her voice now that of an ancient crone. "I'll find another way. I'll..." Her words were cut off as her body crumbled to dust, blown away by a wind that seemed to come from nowhere. The rift she'd been trying to open collapsed in on itself, and the oppressive weight of dark magic that had filled the cavern lifted like a fog being burned away by sunlight. In the sudden silence that followed, Lila collapsed to her knees, utterly drained by the effort of breaking the curse. Damon caught her before she could fall further, his arms strong and warm around her trembling body. "Is it over?" she whispered, barely able to keep her eyes open. "It's over," Damon confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. "You did it, little wolf. You saved us all." Jake approached them slowly, his own wounds forgotten in the face of what he'd just witnessed. "Lila, I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved so much better than what I put you through." Lila looked up at him with eyes that held no anger, only sadness for what might have been. "We all make mistakes, Jake. What matters is what we do to fix them. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for mine," he promised. "Both of our packs have suffered enough because of this feud. Maybe it's time to work toward peace." "I'd like that," Lila said softly. As Damon helped her to her feet, Lila felt something shift inside her chest. The frantic, desperate energy that had driven her for weeks was gone, replaced by a deep sense of peace and completion. The curse was broken, Morgana was defeated, and she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of the man who loved her more than life itself. "Let's go home," Damon said, his voice full of love and promise. And as they walked out of the cavern together, Lila knew that their real adventure was just beginning. If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to support this channel. Chapter 8. 3 months later, Lila stood in the same ceremonial circle where her old life had ended and her new one had begun. But this time, instead of facing rejection and humiliation, she was surrounded by love, acceptance, and the promise of a bright future. The mating ceremony between the alpha of Shadow Ridge Pack and his white wolf Luna was unlike anything the werewolf world had ever seen. Representatives from dozens of packs had come to witness the union, drawn by stories of the battle against Morgana and the healing power that had ended a centuries-old curse. Lila wore a dress of silver and white that seemed to capture moonlight in its flowing fabric, her hair crowned with flowers that had been blessed by Elena and the pack's other healers. She felt beautiful, powerful, and most importantly, loved beyond measure. Across from her in the circle stood Damon, devastatingly handsome in traditional ceremonial robes that emphasized his role as alpha while somehow making his silver eyes seem even more striking. When he looked at her, his expression held such love and devotion that it took her breath away. "My friends," Elder Whitehawk began, his voice carrying easily across the assembled crowd, we gather tonight not just to witness a mating ceremony, but to celebrate the beginning of a new era for all werewolf packs." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, which included not only Shadow Ridge pack members but also representatives from Silver Moon and several other territories that had been locked in long-standing feuds. "The White Wolf prophecy spoke of one who would unite the divided and heal the wounded," the elder continued. "Tonight, we see that prophecy fulfilled in the love between these two souls." He turned to Damon first. "Damon Blackthorne, Alpha of Shadow Ridge Pack, do you take Lila as your mate, your Luna, and your equal in all things?" "I do," Damon said, his voice ringing with absolute certainty. "I promise to love her, protect her, and stand beside her through whatever challenges may come. She is my heart, my soul, and my salvation." Elder Whitehawk nodded approvingly, then turned to Lila. "Lila Hayes, White Wolf and Healer, do you take Damon as your mate, your alpha, and your partner in life?" "I do," Lila replied, her voice strong and clear. "I promise to love him, support him, and share both his burdens and his joys. He is my anchor, my strength, and my home." "Then by the power vested in me by the moon goddess herself," Elder Whitehawk declared, "I pronounce you mated for life. May your bond be a source of strength for your pack and a beacon of hope for all werewolves." The crowd erupted in cheers as Damon pulled Lila into his arms for a kiss that sealed their bond permanently. Power flowed between them, not the desperate, frantic energy of their early days together, but something warm and steady and eternal. When they finally broke apart, Lila saw tears of joy in Sarah's eyes, genuine happiness on Jake's face as he stood with the Silver Moon delegation, and love and acceptance from hundreds of pack members who had already embraced her as their Luna. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and enough food to feed an army. But for Lila, the most meaningful moments were the quiet conversations with pack members who thanked her for bringing peace to their territory, or the shy approaches from young wolves who wanted to learn about healing magic. "Any regrets?" Damon asked as they finally stole a moment alone on the pack house porch, watching the stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. "Only one," Lila said, snuggling closer to his warmth. Damon tensed slightly. "What's that?" "I regret that it took Jake's rejection to bring us together," she said with a smile. "I wish I could have found my way to you sooner." Relief flooded Damon's features, followed by that warm, satisfied smile that never failed to make her heart skip a beat. "Everything happened exactly as it was meant to, little wolf. The moon goddess has perfect timing." "Speaking of timing," Lila said, her hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach, "there's something I need to tell you." Damon's eyes widened as he caught the implication in her words and her scent. "Are you?" 3 weeks along, she confirmed, laughing at the expression of wonder and joy that crossed his face. "Elena confirmed it this morning." Damon's response was to sweep her up in his arms and spin her around, both of them laughing with pure happiness. When he finally set her down, his hands immediately moved to her stomach with the reverent touch of a man who had never expected to live long enough to see his children born. "A pup," he whispered in amazement. "Our pup." "The first of many, I hope," Lila said, covering his hands with hers. "I've always wanted a big family." "Then a big family you shall have," Damon promised, sealing the vow with another kiss. As they stood together under the starlight, surrounded by the sounds of celebration and the warmth of pack bonds that had grown stronger rather than weaker through adversity, Lila reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been a wolfless disappointment, clinging to a relationship that was built more on expectation than genuine love. Tonight, she was a powerful Luna, a healer whose abilities had broken ancient curses and brought peace to warring packs, and most importantly, the beloved mate of a man who saw her as his equal in all things. "What are you thinking about?" Damon asked, noting her contemplative expression. "Just everything," Lila said, gesturing to encompass not just the celebration around them but the entire journey that had brought them to this moment. "How different things might have been if Jake hadn't rejected me." "But he did reject you," Damon pointed out. "And in doing so, he set you free to find your true destiny. Do you think he's happy?" Lila asked, glancing toward where Jake was deep in conversation with some of the other visiting alphas. I mean, really happy, not just putting on a brave face? Damon followed her gaze and considered the question seriously. I think he's finding his way toward happiness. He's learned some hard lessons about leadership and sacrifice, and he's trying to be the alpha his pack deserves. That's all any of us can do. As if sensing their attention, Jake looked up and caught Lila's eye. He raised his glass of wine in a small salute, his expression holding no bitterness or regret, only genuine good wishes for her happiness. She smiled and nodded back, feeling the last bit of old hurt and confusion finally heal completely. You know what I'm most looking forward to? Lila asked, turning back to Damon. What's that? The ordinary moments, she said softly. Waking up next to you every morning, working in the garden, training young healers, watching our children grow up surrounded by pack family. After all the drama and danger and prophecies, I'm ready for a little ordinary happiness. Damon's smile was soft and understanding. Then ordinary happiness is exactly what I'll give you, little wolf. For the rest of our very long, very normal lives. Promise? I promise, he said, and sealed it with a kiss that tasted like forever. As the celebration continued around them and the future stretched out ahead full of infinite possibilities, Lila knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. The white wolf had found her pack, her power, and most importantly, her home in the arms of the man who loved every part of her, the ordinary and the extraordinary alike. And that, she thought as Damon led her back into the warmth and light of their family celebration, was the most magical destiny of all. The end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. I would also love to hear your thoughts, so do well to comment and share this video.